The Viridian hunting pack had tracked prey across 17 star systems, but nothing like the creature they pursued now through the metallic corridors of the abandoned station Kepler 442b. Their thermal scanners showed a bipedal life form, smaller than most sentient species they encountered, moving with calculated precision through the maze of maintenance tunnels. Zektar, the pack leader, flexed his razor-sharp claws as he studied the readings on his wrist display. The creature's heat signature burned bright orange against the cold metal backdrop. Strange. Most prey would be running by now, their body temperature spiking with fear. This one maintained steady vital signs, almost as if it welcomed the chase. Pack leader hissed more done through the comm system. The creature has entered section C7. Should we converge? Zektar considered the tactical display floating before his reptilian eyes. The Viridian hunting syndicate had a perfect record spanning 3 centuries. No prey had ever escaped once they caught the scent. Their reputation stretched across the galaxy as the most feared hunters money could hire. Wealthy collectors paid millions of credits for exotic specimens, and this particular contract promised enough to fund their operations for years. The client had been specific about the target. A human female, military-trained, captured during a border skirmish with the Terran Federation. She had somehow escaped containment during transport and fled to this derelict station. The bounty was substantial, but the client insisted she be taken alive. Something about studying human combat effectiveness. Zektar had laughed when he first heard the description. Humans were a recently discovered species, barely spacefaring for 2 centuries. Their physical capabilities seemed laughably inferior compared to the Viridians' enhanced genetics. They lacked the crushing strength of a Taurian, the speed of a Zephyrite, or the natural weapons of his own people. What could possibly make one human worth such an enormous bounty? Now, stalking through the shadows of the station, he began to sense something was different about this hunt. The humans' movement patterns were too deliberate, too purposeful. Where other prey would panic and make mistakes, this creature seemed to be leading them somewhere specific. Drakesh, report position. Zektar commanded into his calm, static crackled back. Then silence. Zektar's crest of spines rose instinctively. Drakesh was their tracker, positioned at the main junction to prevent escape routes. He never went silent during a hunt unless something had gone very wrong. More done, Siktar, converge on my position. We're changing tactics. The pack moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency. Years of hunting together had honed their coordination to perfection. Zektar took point while his remaining 2 packmates flanked wide, their claws finding purchase on the metal walls as they moved in absolute silence. The thermal trail led them deeper into the station's core. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows that danced across the walls. The air recycling systems had failed long ago, leaving the atmosphere thick and stale. Perfect hunting conditions for creatures who thrived in harsh environments. As they approached Section C7, Zektar noticed something that made his blood chill. The thermal signature had vanished completely. Not gradually, as if the creature had found better cover, but instantly, as if it had simply ceased to exist. His packmates flanked the entrance to the chamber ahead. Zektar's enhanced vision penetrated the darkness, revealing rows of old computer terminals and abandoned workstations. Nothing moved in the shadows. Pack leader, Mordunn's voice carried a note of concern. I'm detecting chemical traces. Something burned here recently. Zektar's nostrils flared as he processed the scents. Plasma discharge, melted metal, and underneath it all, the acrid smell of fear. But not human fear. The scent was distinctly Viridian. They found Drakesh near a collapsed bulkhead. The massive hunter lay motionless, his powerful frame twisted at an unnatural angle. Burn marks covered his chest armor, the metal still glowing faintly from whatever had struck him down. His weapons remained holstered. Whatever killed him had done so before he could react. Zektar knelt beside his fallen packmate, studying the wound patterns. The blast signatures were precise, surgical. This wasn't the wild shooting of a panicked creature. Someone with extensive combat training had executed this kill with cold efficiency. Pack leader, Siktar's voice crackled through the comm. You need to see this. Zektar followed the voice to where his second-in-command stood over another discovery. Scratched into the metal wall were symbols in perfect Galactic standard script. 3 down. 2 to go. Stop hunting me, and I'll let you leave alive. For the first time in 3 centuries of hunting, Zektar felt something he had never experienced before. The cold touch of genuine fear crawled up his spine as he realized the terrible truth. They weren't the hunters in this scenario. They were the prey. Sergeant Maria Santos crouched in the ventilation shaft above the main corridor, watching the 2 remaining Viridians through her scope. Her breathing remained steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. 3 years of fighting in the Outer Rim conflicts had taught her that panic was deadlier than any enemy weapon. She studied the aliens below through her rifle's enhanced optics. The larger one appeared to be the leader, his movements confident despite the obvious tension radiating from both creatures. His scales were darker than the others she had encountered, with silver markings that suggested rank or experience. The second hunter moved with nervous energy, constantly checking corners and scanning for threats. Maria allowed herself a thin smile. Good. They were learning to be afraid. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now hunting the hunters. When she had awakened in the transport ships holding Cell 3 days ago, escape had seemed impossible. The Viridians were legendary throughout known space as the galaxy's most efficient predators. Their clients included crime lords, collectors, and governments who needed problems to disappear quietly. But they had made one critical error. They had underestimated what it meant to be human. Maria shifted position silently, her muscles moving with practiced efficiency. The zero-gravity combat training from her special operations background served her well in the station's cramped spaces. While the Viridians relied on their natural advantages of strength and enhanced senses, she had learned to use technology and tactics to level the playing field. The first kill had been the easiest. The tracker, Drakesh, had been overconfident. He had entered the maintenance section alone, assuming his prey would be cowering in whatever hiding spot they could find. Instead, Maria had rigged a simple trap using the station's power coupling and a broken plasma conduit. When he stepped into the junction, the directed energy blast had been instant and fatal. The second Viridian had provided her with crucial intelligence. After stunning him with an improvised shock device, Maria had accessed his comm system and learned about their pack structure, their hunting methods, and most importantly, their client's identity. The information would prove valuable if she survived long enough to use it. Below her, the pack leader was examining something on his wrist display. Maria recognized the gesture from her observations of Viridian behavior. He was checking thermal readings, trying to track her heat signature. She smiled grimly and adjusted the thermal dampening field she had jury-rigged from the station's environmental controls. Let them wonder where their prey had vanished to. The conversation between the 2 hunters reached her through the enhanced audio pickups she had placed throughout the section. They spoke in their native language, but Maria's combat implants included a universal translator. The fear in their voices was unmistakable. Pack leader, this creature is not behaving like normal prey, the smaller one was saying. Perhaps we should consider withdrawal. The leader's response carried both anger and confusion. We have never failed a contract, more done. The Syndicate's reputation depends on completing this hunt. But at what cost, Zektar? This human has killed 3 of our pack. How is that possible? Maria listened with professional interest as Zektar explained their usual hunting tactics. The Viridians relied heavily on intimidation and overwhelming force. Most species they encountered had evolved as either predators or prey, but rarely both. Humans, however, had developed as omnivores who could switch between roles as circumstances demanded. The station's computer systems chimed softly, indicating that Maria's modifications to the environmental controls were complete. She had spent hours rerouting power conduits and reprogramming atmospheric processors. The Viridians were about to discover that their prey had turned their hunting ground into a carefully orchestrated death trap. Emergency klaxons began blaring throughout the station as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. The lights flickered between normal illumination and complete darkness in random patterns. The air recycling systems kicked into overdrive, creating howling winds through the corridors that would mask any sound Maria might make while repositioning. Through her scope, she watched the 2 hunters struggle to maintain their footing as gravity shifted from normal to half strength to nearly zero in unpredictable cycles. Their enhanced physical capabilities, which gave them such an advantage in normal conditions, now worked against them as their instinctive responses were calibrated for consistent environmental factors. Maria dropped silently from the ventilation shaft into the corridor behind them. Her magnetic boots kept her stable as she raised her weapon. The rifle was a standard Terran military issue, modified with parts salvaged from the station's security systems. Not particularly exotic, but in the right hands, devastatingly effective. "Gentlemen," she called out in perfect Galactic standard, causing both aliens to spin toward her voice. "I believe you're looking for me." Zektar's eyes widened as he took in the sight of his supposed prey. The human female stood completely calm in the chaotic environment, her weapon trained on him with unwavering precision. Her clothing was a mixture of salvaged station materials and pieces taken from his fallen packmates. Most unsettling of all were her eyes, which held the cold calculation of a predator evaluating its next kill. "You are human," he said, stating the obvious while his mind struggled to process the impossible situation. "Sergeant Maria Santos, Terran Federation Special Forces," she replied with military formality. "Serial number 2847 Delta 9. And you gentlemen have been hunting the wrong species." The gravity shifted again, sending Mordun tumbling into a wall. Maria remained perfectly stable, her boots locked to the deck plating. "You see," she continued conversationally, "you've been thinking about this all wrong. You assumed I was prey because that's what your client told you. But humans didn't get to the top of our food chain by running away from predators. We got there by becoming better predators than anything that tried to hunt us." Zektar's claws extended instinctively as he faced the human soldier. Every hunting instinct screamed at him to attack, to use his superior strength and natural weapons to overwhelm this small, seemingly fragile creature. But the bodies of his packmates served as stark reminders that instinct alone would not be enough. "Impossible," he growled, his translator converting the words to Galactic standard. "Your species is primitive, barely evolved beyond your home world. How can one human destroy an entire Viridian hunting pack?" Maria's expression remained unchanged as she kept her weapon trained on the pack leader. Around them, the station continued its chaotic environmental dance, gravity shifting and lights strobing in patterns she had programmed. She had learned long ago that controlling the battlefield was often more important than superior firepower. "You want to know how?" she asked, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had survived impossible odds before. "It's because you fundamentally misunderstood what you were hunting. Your client probably told you I was a soldier, right? That I had military training." Mordun struggled to his feet as gravity stabilized momentarily, his scales scraping against the metal deck plating. His eyes darted between Maria and his pack leader, clearly looking for an opportunity to attack or escape. "The transport records indicated you were captured during a border engagement," Zektar replied carefully. "Standard Terran military personnel." Maria actually laughed, a sound that sent chills through both Viridians. "Standard personnel? Did your intelligence gathering include what unit I served with? What operations I've been involved in?" The pack leader's silence provided her answer. "My unit specializes in asymmetric warfare behind enemy lines," Maria continued. "We're trained to survive alone in hostile territory, to turn any environment into a weapon, and to eliminate targets that conventional forces can't reach. The Federation sends us when they need someone who can hunt the hunters." She gestured around the station with her free hand while keeping the rifle steady. "This place isn't just abandoned to me. It's a resource. Every system, every component, every structural weakness becomes part of my arsenal. While you were tracking me like a running animal, I was preparing to demonstrate why humans are apex predators." Zektar's tactical display suddenly erupted with warnings. His enhanced vision showed him what was happening throughout the station. Emergency bulkheads were sealing randomly, cutting off escape routes. Atmospheric processors were introducing trace gases that would interfere with Viridian respiratory systems. Most alarming of all, the station's old defense grid was somehow coming online, its targeting sensors sweeping the corridors. "You've turned the entire station into a weapon," he said, a note of admiration creeping into his voice despite the mortal danger. "Lesson 1 in human warfare," Maria replied. "Adapt or die. Your people are stronger than us, faster than us, better armed than us. But we're more creative, more resourceful, and more adaptable than any species you've encountered. The lights went completely dark for several seconds. When they returned, Maria had moved position without making a sound. Now she stood where Mordun had been, while the smaller Viridian found himself staring down the barrel of her rifle. "How did you?" Mordun began, his voice shaking. "Lesson 2, Maria interrupted. "Humans evolved on a world with dozens of apex predators. We learned to hunt in packs, to use tools, and to think several moves ahead of our prey. But, most importantly, we learned to be persistence hunters. We don't rely on overwhelming force or superior speed. We exhaust our prey through relentless pressure until they make fatal mistakes." Zektar realized with growing horror that everything she said was true. From the moment they had entered the station, the human had been controlling their movements, forcing them to react instead of act. She had been herding them like prey animals, wearing them down physically and psychologically until they lost their edge. "What do you want?" he asked, his pride warring with the practical need to survive. "Information," Maria replied promptly. "Your client's identity, location, and purpose. The transport ship's navigation logs. Details about your syndicate's operations and client base. Everything you know about why someone wanted me captured alive." Mordun started to object, but Zektar silenced him with a gesture. The pack leader had survived 3 centuries by knowing when to fight and when to negotiate. "And in exchange, you get to leave this station alive," Maria said simply. "Both of you. Your syndicate gets to keep its reputation mostly intact. And you get to tell other hunters that humans are not prey animals." The station's defense systems powered up with an ominous humming sound that vibrated through the deck plating. Automated weapons platforms emerged from concealed compartments throughout the section, their targeting lasers painting red dots across both Viridian's chest plates. "Decide quickly," Maria advised. "My modifications to the station systems are temporary. Eventually, something will overload, and the whole place might destabilize. We'd all prefer to conclude our business before that happens." Zektar looked around at the weapons aimed at him, at the human soldier who had systematically dismantled his pack, at the station that had been transformed into an elaborate trap. For the first time in his long career as a hunter, he truly understood what it felt like to be prey. But he also recognized something else in the human's demeanor. Honor. She could have simply killed them both, but instead she was offering terms. It was a warrior's gesture, one predator acknowledging another's skill while maintaining the option of violence if necessary. "Very well," he said finally. "We will negotiate. But know this, human. When word of this encounter spreads, your species will face challenges you cannot imagine. Other hunters will come. Stronger ones. Smarter ones." Maria's smile held no warmth as she replied. "Let them come. We've been waiting for the galaxy to notice us anyway. It's about time the rest of the universe learned what humans are truly capable of when we stop pretending to be civilized." The negotiation took place in the station's old command center, where Maria had established what she called neutral zone. The automated defense systems remained active throughout the facility, but she had programmed them to ignore this specific room. Both Viridians sat across from her at a salvaged conference table, their weapons placed on the floor in a gesture of temporary truce. Zektar activated his personal data pad and began transferring information. His movements were precise, professional, but Maria could see the tension in his posture. This was the first time in his species' recorded history that Viridian hunters had been forced to negotiate with their prey. "The client contacted us through intermediaries 6 months ago," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "A Zephyrite trade consortium acting on behalf of an unknown principal. The payment was substantial enough that we did not ask detailed questions about motivation." Maria reviewed the data as it appeared on her commandeered terminal. Financial records, communication logs, shipping manifests. The Viridians kept meticulous records of their operations, which made sense for a professional organization that had operated successfully for centuries. "This trade consortium," she said, highlighting several entries in the financial data, "they've hired your syndicate before. Always for captures, never kills. Someone is building a collection." Mordun shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We deliver to specified coordinates. What happens after transfer is not our concern." "It should be," Maria replied sharply. Because whoever your client is, they're not just collecting random specimens. Look at the pattern of species you've captured over the past 5 years. All military personnel, all special forces or elite units, all taken alive. She manipulated the holographic display to show a three-dimensional map of their operations. Red dots marked capture locations across multiple star systems, while blue lines traced the delivery routes. The pattern that emerged was unmistakable. Someone is studying military capabilities across the galaxy, Maria continued. Examining how different species conduct warfare, testing their adaptive capabilities, learning their weaknesses. The question is why? Zektar studied the display with growing unease. He had never considered the broader implications of their contracts, focusing instead on the technical challenges of each individual hunt. Now, seeing the data compiled this way, even he could recognize the strategic implications. You believe we are part of some larger conspiracy, he said. I believe you're being used as intelligence gatherers without realizing it, Maria corrected. Every successful capture provides your client with detailed information about how that species fights, how they think, how they respond to pressure. It's the most comprehensive military intelligence operation I've ever seen. She brought up another series of files from the station's salvage databases. This facility was a research and development station for the Galactic Defense Consortium. It was abandoned after a containment breach 20 years ago. But look at what they were working on here. The holographic display shifted to show technical schematics and research reports, weapons designs, tactical analysis programs, biological enhancement projects, all focused on countering the military capabilities of various galactic species. Your client chose this location specifically, Maria realized as the pieces came together. They knew I would flee here after escaping the transport. They wanted to see how I would adapt to this environment, how I would use the available resources. Mordunn's eyes widened as understanding dawned. We were not hunting you for capture. We were testing you for evaluation. Exactly. And now that the test is complete, I have a pretty good idea of who your client really is. She accessed another section of the station's database, her fingers dancing across the interface with practiced efficiency. Military personnel files began appearing on the display, all marked with the same classification code that had appeared in the Viridian financial records. Admiral Vextar of the Hegemony Fleet, she announced as his holographic image materialized above the table. Wanted by the Galactic Defense Consortium for war crimes, illegal experimentation, and genocide against the Altair colonies. Both Viridians recognized the name immediately. Admiral Vextar was legendary throughout the galaxy as a brilliant tactical mind who had turned rogue after his defeat at the Battle of Proxima Station. He had vanished into the Outer Rim territories 5 years ago, taking a significant portion of the Hegemony fleet with him. He's building an army, Maria continued. Not just ships and weapons, but intelligence. He's testing every major military species in the galaxy to identify their strengths and weaknesses. When he finally makes his move against the major powers, he'll know exactly how to counter their forces. Zektar felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. And now he knows human capabilities. He knows what one human can do in ideal circumstances, Maria corrected. But he doesn't know about human military doctrine, fleet tactics, or industrial capacity. More importantly, he doesn't understand the one thing that makes humans truly dangerous, which is... Maria's expression hardened as she thought about her fallen comrades, her captured squad mates, the colonies that had been attacked while she was held prisoner. Humans don't just fight for territory or resources. We fight for each other. When you threaten one human, you threaten our entire species. And we take that very personally. She began shutting down the station systems, her modifications no longer necessary. The environmental chaos gradually subsided as normal operations resumed. But the defense grid remained active, its weapons still tracking the two Viridians. So here's what's going to happen, Maria said as she stood from the table. You're going to return to your syndicate and tell them that the Vextar contract is terminated. You're going to warn every hunter in the galaxy that humans are now off limits. And you're going to help me get a message to the Galactic Defense Consortium about your client's activities. Zektar considered his options. The logical choice was clear, even if it violated every instinct he possessed as a predator. And if we refuse, Then you don't leave this station alive, Maria replied matter-of-factly. And eventually other humans will track down your syndicate to find out what happened to me. Trust me when I say that you don't want to find out what happens when my species goes to war against yours. The pack leader looked at his companion, then back at the human soldier who had systematically destroyed everything he thought he knew about the galactic hierarchy. Finally, he nodded slowly. We accept your terms, Sergeant Santos. But I want you to understand something as well. What you have done here today will change everything. The galaxy will never see humans as a minor species again. Maria smiled grimly as she began gathering her equipment. Good. It's about time the rest of the universe realized that Earth didn't produce a civilization of prey animals. We're apex predators who learned to build starships. 3 weeks later, Maria Santos stood in the briefing room aboard the Federation battleship Indomitable, surrounded by the highest-ranking military officers in known space. The data she had extracted from the Viridians had sent shockwaves through every major government in the galaxy. Admiral Vextar's intelligence-gathering operation was far more extensive than anyone had realized. Fleet Admiral Chun studied the holographic display, showing Vextar's suspected fleet positions in the Outer Rim. Red markers indicated confirmed sightings, while yellow zones showed areas where his forces might be hiding. The scope of the Rogue Admiral's operation was staggering. 67 different species, Admiral Chin said, reviewing the intelligence reports. Elite military personnel from every major power in the galaxy. He's been studying our tactics for 5 years while we thought he was just another warlord hiding in the wilderness. General Karthak, the Taurian representative, slammed his massive fist on the conference table. My people lost 12 Special Forces operatives to Viridian hunters last year. We assumed they were being sold to slave markets. Instead, they were being delivered to our enemy for interrogation. Maria remained silent as the assembled officers processed the implications. She had delivered her intelligence report 3 days ago, but the political and military ramifications were still unfolding. Every government that had lost personnel to the hunting syndicates was now reassessing their security protocols and strategic planning. The question now, said Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrite Federation, is what we do with this information. Vextar's fleet is still formidable, and now we know he has detailed intelligence on all our military capabilities. Actually, Maria interjected, drawing attention from around the room, I think we have an advantage he doesn't realize. Admiral Chin gestured for her to continue. Explain, Sergeant. Maria activated her personal data pad, adding new information to the holographic display. Vextar's intelligence is based on individual performance under control conditions. He knows how a Taurian Special Forces operative fights when isolated and under pressure. He knows how a Zephyrite pilot responds to specific tactical scenarios. But he doesn't understand how these species work together. The display shifted to show joint military operations from the past century. Battles where multiple species had coordinated their efforts, combining their unique capabilities into something greater than the sum of their parts. The Viridian hunters told me something interesting during our negotiation, Maria continued. They said that most species they encounter evolved as either predators or prey, but rarely both. Humans are unusual because we developed as omnivores who could switch roles as needed. But what makes the galactic community truly unique is that we've learned to hunt together. General Karthak leaned forward with interest. You're suggesting a joint operation. I'm suggesting we turn Vextar's own intelligence gathering against him. He expects each species to fight according to the patterns he's observed. He's prepared for Taurian strength, Zephyrite speed, and human adaptability. But is he prepared for all three working in perfect coordination? Admiral Chin studied the tactical projections Maria was displaying. Combined fleet movements, coordinated ground operations, integrated command structures. It was ambitious beyond anything that had ever been attempted on such a scale. The political challenges alone would be enormous, Ambassador Veltar pointed out. Our governments have been allies for decades, but joint military command is unprecedented. So is using hunters to gather military intelligence, Maria replied. Vextar has forced us to evolve our approach. The question is whether we're willing to adapt faster than he can react. Over the next several hours, they worked through the tactical and logistical challenges. Each species would contribute their greatest strengths while covering their allies' weaknesses. Taurian heavy assault forces would provide overwhelming firepower. Zephyrite scouts would handle reconnaissance and rapid deployment. Human special forces would adapt the plan as conditions changed and handle unconventional warfare. But the true innovation was in the command structure itself. Instead of a traditional hierarchy, they would use distributed decision-making protocols that allowed each species' commanders to respond according to their natural instincts while maintaining overall coordination. It's never been attempted before, General Karthak admitted, but then again, we've never faced a threat like Vextar before. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Chun pulled Maria aside. There's something else, Sergeant. The Viridians have requested a meeting with our diplomatic corps. Apparently, your encounter with their hunting pack has had significant repercussions within their syndicate. Maria raised an eyebrow. What kind of repercussions? They want to discuss a formal alliance. It seems they've realized that being known as the galaxy's most feared hunters isn't as valuable as being allied with species that can turn the tables on them. The irony wasn't lost on Maria. By proving the humans could hunt the hunters, she had fundamentally shifted the galactic balance of power. Species that had been content to remain prey were beginning to question their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Admiral, she said after a moment of consideration, I'd like to make a request. Go ahead. When we move against Vextar, I want to be part of the advanced team. He used me as a test subject, and I want to show him the results of his experiment. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. I was hoping you'd say that, Sergeant. Something tells me that Vextar is about to discover that his intelligence gathering only taught him how individual species fight. He's about to learn what happens when apex predators work together. Maria looked out through the ship's viewport at the assembled fleet. Ships from dozens of worlds, representing species that had been enemies, rivals, or strangers just weeks ago. Now they were united by a common threat and a shared realization that they were stronger together than apart. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. Not just a military operation, but an evolution in how intelligent species could cooperate. Vextar had sought to exploit their individual weaknesses, but instead he had forced them to discover their collective strength. As the fleet began moving toward the outer rim, Maria reflected on how much had changed since her capture. She had entered that transport ship as a prisoner. Now she was part of something that could reshape the balance of power across known space. The hunters had become the hunted, but more importantly, the prey had become predators. And Admiral Vextar was about to learn that some lessons could only be taught through overwhelming force.